If you fall within a category of viewers who have children, then today's program is especially for you. I'm Barry Gilreath Jr., minister of the Jackson Heights Church of Christ in Florence, Alabama, and your host today for this special program on grandparents. So get your Bible, gather your family together because it's time to begin Fabric of Family. In 1996, Jean Calmert turned 121 years old, and at that age, she was the oldest living human at that time. Though she had lived a long life and her age was certainly beginning to wear on her, Jean hadn't lost one bit of her wit and humor. In fact, on one occasion, when a reporter asked her to describe her vision for the future, she quickly replied, "Well, very brief." And when she was asked what she liked best about being so old, she wryly responded, "Well, there's no peer pressure." You see, Jean Calmert was a wife, a mother, and a grandparent. And to everyone who knew her in her latter years, she was certainly a grandmother due to the fact that she had lived so long here on this earth. You know, the psalmist wrote, "O God, Thou hast taught me from my youth, and hereunto have I declared Thy wondrous works. Now also, when I'm old and gray-headed, O God, forsake me not, until I have showed Thy strength unto this generation, and Thy power to every one that is to come." Psalm 71, verses 17 and 18. You know, grandparents are special people. I mean, where would we be today without these wonderful people in our lives? And you know, children can sometimes say the funniest things. And I recently came across a list of responses that were given by 8-year-olds as a part of a school class project. They were asked to describe exactly what a grandparent was. Here are some of the responses. One child said, "Grandparents are a lady and a man who have no little children of their own, but they like other people's little kids." And then I really like this one. One young person said, "A grandfather is a man grandmother." And then here's another response that was given by one of those children. They said, "Grandparents take us for walks and they slow down past the pretty things like leaves and caterpillars." And then finally, one young person said, "Grandparents like to read to us and they don't skip the pages." Yes, grandparents are very special indeed, aren't they? We hope you enjoy the program that we have for you today. Well, thank you for joining us now for our panel discussion, and I have with me two very special guests, Robert Hatfield and Paul Sane. Both of these men have been with us on previous programming, and they're always a great resource to us here on Fabric of Family. Robert and Paul, before we begin, it could be there's someone watching the program who doesn't know who you are, and they've not heard you on previous programming, so let's take just a moment and allow you to introduce yourself. First of all, we'll start with Robert.
Well, I'm Robert Hatfield, and I'm one of the preachers for the East Hill Congregation of God's People in Pulaski, Tennessee, and just honored to be here today.
And I'm Paul Sane, work with the East Hill Church also. We are co-workers together, and honored to be a part of the good East Hill Church in Pulaski, and love and appreciate Fabric of Family as well, and Gospel Broadcasting Network, and any opportunity that we have of reaching out anywhere in the Alabama, Tennessee, and wherever else we may be going.
Well, thank you very much. It's very kind of you to say that, and I appreciate, again, both of you being with us. We're going to go ahead and get right into our discussion. We're talking about grandparents, and I'd like to see what your thoughts are concerning the role that grandparents are to fulfill today in the home. If any role, does God give grandparents a role? What are your thoughts about that?
Wow, great question, especially to somebody that loves being a grandparent. We've been blessed. My wife and I have 7 grandchildren, and The role that we try to fill right now is a challenging, daunting task of teaching and guiding and loving and embracing and, yes, spoiling maybe a little bit every once in a while, but hopefully in a good way. In our world today, we see a lot more of the role, I believe, of grandparents. But, you know, in the Bible, we do that as well. Just recently, I had an occasion with our teen class to go over the book of Ruth and how husbands died and then they remarried, Ruth and Moab, and how Naomi, in that grandparent role, taking care of those grandchildren, how special it was, what an impact she had. But then, of course, we can also remember Timothy, and a significant role as far as a grandparent there, can't we?
That's right. 2 Timothy 1 talks about the invaluable influence that Lois and then Timothy's grandmother Eunice would have on shaping Timothy's life. Absolutely. I was just thinking, I am severely outnumbered on this panel because there are 2 grandparents here, and I'll let the audience at home guess which 2 are the grandparents. I'm not even a parent, but I've heard Paul say before that he might, or maybe it was your wife who said, that she might have skipped the children to get to the grandchildren.
If we'd had that luxury, yes.
Okay.
Doesn't work that way.
No.
No.
It's only because the grandchildren are grand, but the children are grand too. So it's great.
Well, do you think that the role of parenting is a role that is expanding today in our modern society?
I would say absolutely yes. With the number of broken homes that there are and the number of children that are being born into single-parent situations, many times it's the grandparents, in my experience, that are stepping in. And of course we won't do this, but certainly all of us could name individuals who have stepped into a parent role when they're actually grandparents, and who in a very real sense have kindly saved that child from who knows what kind of upbringing might have been ensued as a result of their coming in and stepping in and expanding the role than maybe what even traditional grandparenting called for.
Well, you mentioned a couple of segments that are certainly valid segments as far as where it's expanded, but also look at it from the working mom and the parents, that a lot of times it takes both parents even working in order to even keep financially above their heads above water, and thus the parents oftentimes have to step in there as well. So we've got so many different segments that are forcing almost the grandparents to step into that role.
You know, when I was little, my grandparents on both sides of the family, I was fortunate enough to live in the same town where both sides of my family were, and as a result of that, they would keep me before I started the school system. And I can't tell you how invaluable and what fond memories I have of those times as well.
I remember your grandfather coming over the church building, of course, right across from where you lived at that time, and he'd pick you up and take you to, he was a doctor, a veterinarian doctor, and Robert had his little area and practice area and where he started doing a lot of things and was trained in that way.
Right, sure.
So the invaluable way that took place.
Well, you know, so many grandparents are taking on additional roles based upon societal factors, and sometimes this is of necessity. There could be a situation where perhaps a parent or parents are tragically killed. Perhaps they're killed in an accident of some kind. And so a grandparent will step in and assume the role that the parent would typically have to assume. But you also hinted on the fact that sometimes it's not because of a situation like that, but it's just simply because the parent, for whatever reason, is refusing to assume the responsibility that God has given to them. What advice would you give to someone who's a grandparent? Maybe there's a grandparent watching our program today, and they're having to take a very active role in raising a grandchild, not because their children are not here and are not able to do that, but because of the fact that their child, their grown child, is not stepping up and accepting their responsibility as a parent. What advice would you give to a grandparent who's in that situation?
Again, a challenging question, Barry, and a great one that needs exploring. My wife and I have had 4 children biologically, but we've also cared for 5 children, foster children. And the same, as you were even asking the question, I could not help but go there with what we attempted to do in lieu of their biological parent, most of the time the biological parent just refused, didn't want anything to do with them. And one child came to us at 5 days, another at 12 years, another at 16, etc. Well, their parents just abandoned them. But that child did not have anything to do with that. That child was not to be blamed for that. And that child needed someone that was a role model, someone to help mold and guide them and love them to death. And thus, we stepped into that role, not that we were the perfect ones, we were not, but just to be able to help that child in the same way if they were ours biologically. That child needed love, that child needed teaching, needing help with homework or whatever it may be, dating, or as they reach that stage of their life. And thus, often, the grandparent of necessity gives that child what is needed because no one else will or can.
I would say to those people in that kind of situation, just don't give up. I know that those kind of people bear an unfathomable burden, and know that we're praying for you and for your efforts, and do the best you can. I'm thinking of people whom I know, and they're under tremendous stress and burdens as a result of this very situation. But you know what, they're blessing lives. And I know sometimes, even as Paul hinted at, social circles or even small towns or something might tend to blame the child and put on the child the bad name that their parents perhaps have. But don't be discouraged by that. Just turn to God and to His Word and do what you need to do.
What do you think that a grandparent ought to step forward and talk to their grown children, you know, about this situation?
I absolutely do. A parent is still a parent to a child, even when that child may be on up in years.
And I guess that's what I'm getting at.
Yes.
What responsibility do parents have toward their grown children who are not living like they ought to?
There's a different role for sure, because in times past the parent might be able to say, now you've got to do this, and they would have to do that. Whereas, as my mother used to say, when you get 3 times 7, 21 years of age, you can choose, or even earlier than that, you can choose what you want to do or not do in life. And there's a limitation concerning what the parents can make their children do. But to advise, to help them, to see the need for the responsibility and fulfilling that responsibility, to plead with them in behalf of the child, to help them to see that child needs you very much, to love them and care for them, teach them, and show them all these things that they need. So yes, that would never stop.
What about it, Robert? What's your thoughts?
I was just thinking about Titus chapter 2, and of course this is God's plan as given by Paul through inspiration for the church at large, but certainly it applies in a family context, where he says there that the older men are to teach the younger men, and that the older women are to teach the younger women. And it's interesting there, I guess we could do some studies to see what those Greek words would have meant in that day and what age limits that would have entailed at that time. But for all practical purposes, the ages are not specified, so it's up to us. And that might be hard to get, especially some older women, to come out and identify themselves as such. But when we think about, okay, older people have a responsibility to younger people. And so a grandparent has that responsibility to their child who might be failing. And then that child who might be failing their responsibilities as a parent has a responsibility then to their younger children. And there's nothing that anyone can do to take away the fact that you are still that person's dad. You are still that child's mom. And as such, God has given you a very important responsibility, and we need to step up to that.
I'm sitting here thinking, too, of exactly those words being so true. But a parent and the obligation to bring that child up, and if that child at the time in their life where they have children themselves and neglecting that, it might be reflective upon the failure of the grandparent, as we're talking about now, in their failure to bring that child to that point, and thus to teach and or reteach, reiterate what has been stated or didn't take or whatever, to help that child to recognize that. Maybe as a grandparent to go to that child and admit, I probably failed you. I maybe did not teach you all that I should. Maybe I failed to emphasize certain things that really needed to be noted. And may I talk with you, may I teach you now, even in that way. Sometimes to admit our failure puts us on an equal playing field with the one to whom we're talking.
What an important thing for us to consider, how that not only do we have a responsibility to our grandchildren, but also to our own children, even if they're grown. Well, we're going to take a break now in our program, and we have a special segment that is entitled Word for the Family. And this week, we're going to have Wes Ayers, who's going to be talking to us about parenting. Of course, Wes is typically out on the street and is doing street interviews, but we brought him into the studio today, and I think you're going to find that he has a very interesting segment. So we're going to watch this, and we'll be back with our discussion in just a moment.
You know, when I hit this ball, I fully expect it to go in a certain way, in a certain direction, in hopes that at a certain time I'll reach the hole in a proper amount of strokes. However, many times this ball, more often than not, it goes in many different directions. It never goes the direction that I want it to go. But the ball, when hit, it does exactly what I have instructed it to do. The more I practice and the more that I put some effort into it, the more that I can ensure this ball is going to do exactly what I need it to do. You see, the ball is instructed to do what I tell it to do. It's frustrating when the golf ball and I am not on the same page. But did you know that a recent study has shown that 74% of teens believe that there's a disconnect between them and their parents, while the same study showed that only 38% of parents believe there's a disconnect between them and their teenagers. See, we're not always on the same page. One of the more tragic events in our society is the continued eroding of the family at its basic functional unit. The 6th chapter of Paul's letter to the Ephesians addresses relationships within the home and how they can be shaped by godly virtues. It shows a model that honors God and returns the home to what God desires. The first few verses, verses 1 through 4, address the relationship between parents and children. Ephesians 6, verses 1 and 2, "Children, obey your parents, for this is right. Honor thy father and mother." Paul considers obedience to parents to be one of the most important characteristics of childhood behavior. But what does this mean to us as adults? Certainly as adults, we are to continue to respect and care for our own parents. But the lesson here is for parents to require obedience from their children. Ephesians chapter 6 and verse 4 says, "And yet, fathers, provoke not your children to wrath, but bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord." How do we go about putting together a home atmosphere that encourages obedience? Children need a suitable motivation. You know, there are 2 ways to motivate someone to exhibit a specific behavior. We can reward them lovingly, or we can judge them and punish them severely. Many families have been divided over an event where one or more of the members have acted like the brothers of Joseph. You see, Joseph's brothers hated him so much that they sold him into Egyptian slavery. And then they went and reported to their father that he had been killed by a wild animal. Hearts are often hardened and little to no communication takes place after a family division. And to maintain such a rift is inconsistent with a Christian life. When such a disfellowship exists in the family, everyone suffers. Bringing up children in today's culture is certainly a challenge. I have an 18-month-old, so we challenge daily to find out what it is that he needs and what it is that his specific needs may be just for the current time. However, there are a few verses that give us some very important insight into how to have our families be successful. Parents do not need to succumb to the worldly opinions that leave them powerless. God has a plan for the family, and He has a plan for the family structure. God's family is formed of parents who love and care for one another and who love and care for their children. And we must adhere to those rules. So many times the family unit is broken over something very simple. But when we go back to the basic instructions that were given in Ephesians chapter 6, when we go to those simple instructions and we find what we need to do as parents and what children need to do and how our home is supposed to be built, and when the instructions are followed, the family unit is built correctly. See, when I hit this ball, it starts from the structure. It starts from the bottom. It starts from a foundation. It starts from everything with my feet, all the way up through my backswing, to watching the ball, to eventually getting it in the hole. At some point, we have to go back to our basic function, and we have to go back to the basic instructions and go back to what God defines as a family.
Well, we're back, and I want to thank you for joining us again for the second part of our panel discussion. We've been talking about the role of grandparents in the home, and I want to raise this question, see what your thoughts are. What do you think some mistakes are that grandparents can make along the way that can have a negative impact upon the development of their grandchildren?
One of the things that I have experienced tragically myself from the standpoint of those that have come and asked for help has been the individuals themselves have not always been faithful to God. They themselves have not been as zealous and fervent in serving God. And then as they get a little bit older, maybe in the role of grandparents, all of a sudden they realize the fragile nature of life, the brevity of life, the need for being right in God's sight, but they've already tragically set a bad example for the children, grandchildren as well. And now they're trying to recoup that, trying to rectify that. And sometimes what they have done is not what they're now saying. So living a life of stability and service to God long term through the years sets that stage instead of making the mistake of the otherwise.
Well, what if the grandparent recognizes that they didn't do as they should have early on? I mean, is it ever too late to change and to have a positive impact upon your grandkids?
I don't believe it's ever too late. We know some individuals that have, even in the latter part of their years, tried to rectify that. Sometimes it's not recoverable in the case of the grandchildren who have been taught year after year after year to live a certain way, but it's not too late for them and not too late to try, surely.
Well, is it possible, you think, for grandparents, and they may be very well good intentioned, but is it possible for grandparents to overstep their bounds and infringe upon the role that parents should and could be fulfilling?
That's a good question for a young man that...
Oh, yeah. Someone who can really get himself in trouble.
I'm thinking
TV.
of that, yes. Well, see, it's better than me right now, see.
Right, I see. You know, I imagine that it would be possible for a grandparent to be looking at a parent, and this would go outside, I guess, of the realms that we have discussed before the break and now in our discussion now, but onto a different scenario. Maybe here's a grandparent who is observing their children, and they don't think they're doing it right. And so they overstep the bounds of their children then as parents to their grandchildren, and in so doing not only do that to the embarrassment of the parent, but maybe to do it in front of the grandchildren as well, and to create an authority conflict. I could see where that could be an issue.
Excellent point.
Absolutely, great point. And when our children establish their own home, they're the head of that home.
Yeah.
They have the right by God to direct that home. And Robert, as you pointed out correctly, we as grandparents or as their parents, we need to back off to some degree. I mean, we made mistakes. They have the right to make their mistakes as well. And it may be painful at times, but we could easily overstep and try to dictate to them what they've got to do and should not do that.
On the flip side of that, though, we could take the reverse and say, okay, the value of learning from other people's mistakes and history, and learning the lessons from the past so that we don't repeat mistakes that were made in a previous way, and thus valuing the role of grandparents and of experience and things so much as it's in a reasonable way.
Well, let's think about the consequences for just a moment. In a situation where a grandparent does overstep the bounds and infringe upon the responsibility of the parents, what effect, either positive, and I don't think it's going to be positive anyway, or negative, how does that affect the parents? And not only the parents, but the second part of the question is, how does that affect their grandchildren, those children of their own children?
Let's imagine a couple of children in the average home, and here's a mom and dad that's trying to do the best they can, but making mistakes, as we all do. And let's say here's a pair of grandparents that are also dictating, and here's the children, the grandchildren to the grandparents, and the children of the parents that are sitting there listening to as much as 6 different voices, sometimes conflicting voices, sometimes contradictory. I'm talking about literally, don't do what mama says, you do what I say type of thing. That child has got to be living in a torment situation of trying to weigh, well, who do I please and what way is best? And we don't need to put a child in that. A small child is not able to completely assimilate all of that information and make good decisions oftentimes. Grandparents need to enhance and cause stability for that child especially, but so should parents, and thus to not make it where a mom and a dad are at conflict with each other, or parents are at odds with even their parents, the child's grandparents.
Well, let's think about the spiritual life of the grandchild for just a moment. And let's think about the lasting impression that a grandparent wants to make upon that grandchild. What is something that a grandparent can do that will make a lasting impression that will live on long after the grandparent has left this earth? What's something they can do that would contribute to the spiritual well-being of their grandchildren?
Number one is a godly example. A godly example, I would say. I've got my own grandparents, some of whom have departed to be with the Lord, and others of whom are still with me, and I'm so happy about that. And I look up to all of them, those who have left their legacy and those who still are leaving their legacy for me and for many others. In the same way, I have a lot of people that I refer to at East Hill, since I grew up there, as adopted grandparents. and to me, these are people who I know they're not perfect, but in my mind they might as well be. And they're a kind example, the way that they serve other people, you know, on and on it could go. Their prayer life, the spiritual giants that they are. Boy, that just makes me want to be better just by being around them. And I'm going to remember them and their example for years and years to come.
Well, that's all the time that we have today for our program, but we wouldn't want to leave you without first extending an invitation to you and your family to come and visit with us at the Jackson Heights Church of Christ. We're located at 1031 Hermitage Drive in Florence, Alabama, near the University of North Alabama football stadium. And we would like to have you to come and be with us at any time you could, because anytime you come, you're going to be our honored guest. We'd also like to make you aware of an opportunity that we are going to provide to you to study the Bible in the privacy of your home through a free Bible correspondence course. You can either just call us or write to us, and we'll be glad to get that started for you. And we invite you to join our program next week as we're going to be examining another important topic, the topic of youthful potential and what young people have to offer in the kingdom of God. And so until next time, I'm Barry Gilreath, your host, wishing you a bright and wonderful week as you walk in the sunshine of His grace.